Okay, 1940. That became a chant. But we'll get into the chant in a bit. The Bruins lead the way in the 1939-40 season with a 31-12-5 record, which means they didn't win the Cup. The Rangers are next at 27-11-10, Toronto 25-17-6, Chicago 23-19-6, Detroit 16-26-6, the New York Americans, who are flailing at this point, 15-29-4, and the Montreal Canadiens a woeful 10-33-5, and eventually the rules would get changed to favor them and almost everybody except the 1940 Stanley Cup champions. We'll get into that. January 25th, 1940, longtime Boston Bruin Eddie Shore is traded to the New York Americans. That had to be miserable for him. Had to be. Art Ross, May 13th of 1939, suggested a stick with a wooden handle and a metal blade. He brings it to the NHL and says we should let guys play with these. So that's well back at the time we would have expected that to show up. February 25th, 1940, Montreal and the New York Rangers have the first ever televised game in the U.S. It was televised to a very small audience, but it's a televised game nonetheless. Hart winner is Eddie Goodfellow of the Detroit Red Wings. Calder winner, Kilby McDonald of the New York Rangers. Vezina winner, Dave Kerr, also of the New York Rangers. And the Lady Bing goes to Bobby Bauer of the Boston Bruins. Did they do that on purpose? Bing, Bobby Bauer, Boston Bruins? Was that why Bobby Bauer of the Boston Bruins won the Bing? And how many Bings could Bobby Bauer win to the Boston Bruins if Bobby Bauer won Bings? Anyways, we'll get off that. It's kind of a silly topic. I do tend to go off on those silly topics, though. So we again still have this system where the top two teams face off for a chance to go to the Stanley Cup final. And if this happened now, there'd be riots in the streets. But the New York Rangers win Game 1 at home, 4-0. Boston Bruins win Game 2, 4-2. The Boston Bruins win Game 3, 4-3. The New York Rangers win Game 4, 1-0. Game 5 is won by the Rangers, 1-0. And Game 6 is won by the Rangers, 4-1. So the first place finish for Boston gets them nowhere. Quarterfinals. So while that's going on, the quarterfinals, Series B, Chicago, Toronto. Toronto wins the first game 3-2 in overtime. They win Game 2, 2-1 to win the series in 2. It's a best of 3 still. The other quarterfinal, the Detroit Red Wings win 2-1 over the New York Americans. The New York Americans win Game 2, 5-4. And Detroit beats the New York Americans 3-1 to win the series in 3. And then the semifinals, Detroit and Toronto play off for a chance to go to the Stanley Cup final and meet the Rangers. Toronto wins 2-1. Toronto wins 3-1. They win the series in 2. So you got the Leafs, you got the Rangers in the final. The Rangers win Game 1, 2-1 in overtime. They win Game 2, 6-2. Toronto wins Games 2 and 3 by scores of 2-1 and 3-0. The New York Rangers then win Game 5 in Toronto, double overtime, 2-1. And Game 6 also won in Toronto, 3-2. And the coach, the New York Rangers, to win that Stanley Cup, Frank Boucher, the guy who was winning all of those Lady Bing trophies 10 years earlier. So everything's great in New York, but you'll notice there's a bunch of games in Toronto. See, Madison Square Garden getting rented out happens. So while they play some of their games at home, some of their home games are played elsewhere. This is only going to get worse. And Rangers management is its own worst enemy. And this is where the curse begins. 1940 New York Rangers are the Stanley Cup champions, are at the top of the world. Madison Square Garden Corporation is seen burning the mortgage they had just paid off of the Madison Square Garden, the third Madison Square Garden, I might add, in the Stanley Cup Bowl. Is that the reason for the curse? Not really. It's not going to cause them... It's a sign of how tone-deaf they were. Original Six corruption played a large role. So James Norris, who owned the Red Wings, yes, the Norris Trophy, I believe, is named after him. And he partially owned the Chicago Blackhawks and New York Rangers as well, so he could stack the good players in Detroit and just give Chicago and the Rangers whatever was left over. That's fair. And the Rangers always got the least of what was left over. after going to the Stanley Cup final in 1950, the Rangers would only make the playoffs, I think they said 7 times out of the next 17 years, even though there were 6 teams in the league and 4 of them made the playoffs every year. It's that bad. It's that bad. Boston had its lean days, but Chicago and the Rangers really took it during the original 6 era. And then the 1940 chant, which became prevalent when I was watching hockey, started in 1981. The New York Islanders are on their way to their second of 4 straight Stanley Cups. And while knocking out the Rangers, New York Islander fans started the 1940 chant. And talk of a curse started back in the 70s. But when you look at it, World War II hit them hard, and we'll get into that as the days go on here. World War II hit them hard enough that they asked, hey, can we suspend operations? Because we don't know if we can ice a team. The other name responsible, according to curse lore, is Red Dutton. Red Dutton, who was with the New York Americans, who were forced out by the New York Rangers, said, the Rangers will never win the Cup again in my lifetime. And they didn't, because he passed away in 1987. Interesting thing was that after Frank Calder left and before Clarence Campbell came in to run the league, Red Dutton ran the league. When the New York Rangers asked, hey, can we back out? We need a break. Red Dutton said, no. So there's some thought that maybe Red Dutton, as the president of the league, didn't want to do the Rangers any favors. And the league didn't either. Territorial rights will become a thing in the 50s, and you're going to see a massive change in the standings and the way things work. Basically, it's if a player lives within 50 miles of your city, you have the rights to him. Well, Detroit and Chicago are within 50 miles of Canadians. And a vast majority of the players at this point are just all Canadians, right? Montreal, Toronto, that really favors them. Boston gets through, really hits the Rangers. Absolutely devastates the Rangers with that rule. Because it leaves them looking within their own city or maybe New Jersey for players. That's pretty much it. So 1940 is a year that sees the Rangers at the top of the mountain. But a combination of poor management, poor ownership, and a war that they had no part in, but their players certainly did. It will all conspire to knock them down for the next 40 or 54 years before they win a Stanley Cup again. It's funny because it's impossible for me to do this video and end with their Rangers are Cup champions and not mention the curse. Because it's a huge part of the Rangers lore. And you look at it, now they haven't won a cup in 24 years. Again, so they've won 1 cup in 78 years. It's a long time. So there you go, Rangers fans. That's your second to last Stanley Cup victory. I apologize for that, but I wasn't alive at the time that this took place. I had no way of preventing it. But hey, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do not forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. Just hit upon this video, and I'll talk to you again soon.